Thanks everyone for joining. Hope you're having an amazing Austin Design Week. I can't believe it's already halfway over. It's pretty crazy. But I'm Katie. I'm part of the Austin Design Week team this year, and I'm here to kick off our event. Make sure that if you haven't already, feel free to find us on social media and connect with us and tag us in that way to stay a part of the conversation. And we want to say thank you to all of our sponsors. Without them, none of this at all would be possible any of the years that we've done so far. So we have some great local companies, great companies that have helped us out throughout all of our years that we'd like to thank here. So be sure to, it's awesome that we get to have this meeting format for this virtual event, so the conversation can be all inclusive, and that's very exciting. And make sure to keep an eye on the chat though as well, because we're going to be sharing some ADW resources within the chat, including a survey at the very end of the event that we'd love to get your feedback. If you can just click on that and answer a few short questions. We're always looking for feedback to make this event the greatest it can be each year. So that's it for me. That's all of the things. I'll just go ahead and pass it off to your awesome host, Lawrence, who's going to be sharing his screen and sharing his amazing insights.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And I appreciate you all and your all's time. So I will share my screen and get on with the main event here. So let me share my keynote, and I will hide your amazing faces for a moment. So can I said I did that prematurely. So just by maybe Katie, I'm seeing you now. Can you see my screen fine? Maybe just a thumbs up or something like that.
Yeah, I can see it. Okay. It's not like we see all the
okay. I'll hit play.
Cool.
All right, so thanks y'all. For those, I see some familiar faces here. That's always awesome, and even more awesome to see a lot of unfamiliar faces. So I'm Lawrence Humphrey. I'm based in Austin, Texas here, and I will be talking with you about achieving equity in the tech industry. And it's probably worth noting that I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tech Can Do Better. You can think of it as a consultancy in the intersection of tech and DEI. And I'll be talking about how to convert something really systemic, racial equity, into something bite-sized that all of us can practically do starting today. So first things first, I have a question for y'all. Does anyone know what this is? And I can't see your face, so maybe you can go off mute. I'll give you permission to go off mute and shout out what this answer is. Any guesses?
The first thing can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, cool, perfect. The first thing comes to mind is I'm just thinking of biology and bacteria or a virus that kind of infects one, living organism, and then just kind of makes its way onto the other ecosystem. That's just the first thing that comes to mind when I see this diagram.
Yeah, interesting that that's the first thing that came to your mind, because that's the right answer. So this is a simulated spread of coronavirus that has, in no small terms, impacted all of our lives in significant ways and in lasting ways, and changed how we interact with and see the world. Personally, this much is definitely true. And in quarantine, one of my consistent areas of reflection about this virus is what epidemiologists and biologists call this R0 factor. So the transmissibility of a virus, let's say, and for COVID, it's roughly 3 on average, meaning that the average person transmit the virus to 3 people. And I found this really insightful and really powerful, in that the 2 questions that I subsequently found myself reflecting on is, what would the world look like if progress or anything for the betterment of society spread in a similar way? and how we can achieve, this R naught equals 3, the same transmissibility that progress society and leave society better instead of make society worse and tear us apart. So it's this ethos that underpins Tech Can Do Better as an organization. So we exist as an organization to ensure that progress is both felt and shaped in comparable proportion, knowing that it is a cyclical, chicken and egg sort of situation, having the everyday individual have control over their own future and both feeling the impact of that control. By providing the most actionable and comprehensive solutions for systemic racial equity in the tech industry. And this underpins our ethos. This is why we exist. This is what we're set out to accomplish. This is our mission. And we see a few levers for systemic change, conceptually and abstractly, even agnostic of the tech industry. There is the top-down focus. So the leaders of an organization or an institution, they have power. We often think about leaders having power. There's the bottom up, so the everyday populace, so be it workers, citizens of an institution or a community, and that comprises the inside out transformation. But there is also the outside in forces that interact with and keep the checks and balances against the system. And these are the three levers for systemic change. And it's worth noting that you have to have all three, and you can't just focus on one of these. Systemic change exists at a broad and wide scale. And right at the onset, it's worth talking a little bit about our scope and preempting maybe some of the questions you all have about where Tech Can Do Better starts and stops. So first things first, our leadership team here that you see on the right is based in the US. So that's the geo, if you will, that we'll be focused on. We work in the tech industry, evident in the name in and of itself. And lastly, if you look at us, we're pretty Black. So all of this to say that I believe that some of our recommendations and thinking and the way that we approach the world can undoubtedly be used for different geos, for different industries, different sectors, different identities. But we have the highest probability of success by focusing on our narrow slice of the problem and the problem that we know the best and have the most control over. And while I'm level setting on our scope, I feel like it's worth spending some time to discuss some words that I'll say a lot and having a shared vocabulary on some facts and figures and some words that I'll say ad nauseum. First things first, systemic. So when I say that, I mean beyond the scope of an individual person, organization, or policy. So often when we talk about problems or potential solutions, we often talk about an individual and frame it through what they're doing poorly or what they're doing really well. And that has merit, but it's worth considering that that person exists within the context of other people, which exist within the context of some institution, which exists within the ecosystem of other institutions that are all checking and balancing this institution. So having both the 1,000-foot magnification view, macro view of the problem, as well as the micro individual personal view of the problem. Equity means making accommodations to account for historical disadvantages primarily attributable to discrimination and unjust treatment, and alongside the main culprits have been race and gender primarily. And there are a lot of ways to visualize this disenfranchisement and this unlevel playing field. And those are all good and valid visualizations. But the one piece and the one element that I find that they're all missing is how these gaps might shift and change over time. And then the subsequent policies that shape the delta for how these gaps grow and shrink over time. So it's important when we talk about equity, not only to see the snapshots of where one demographic might be relative to another, but how these are growing and shrinking over time. And lastly, in terms for the definitional part, parity, so mirroring baseline proportions as determined by local benchmarks. And I'm going to show you a graph, and I know graphs are kind of gross, and I don't want to get fixated on the numbers as much as the essence. So in the United States, this is roughly the demographic breakdown for of the most represented racial populations. This is the makeup of the tech industry overall. And what's important to note here when I say equity is that ideally we should be within some reasonable range with respect to parity and with respect to some benchmark. And in order to do this sufficiently and thoroughly, we have to look at the representation across each level and disaggregate and further disaggregate the data. So this represents a distribution of most leadership in tech companies. And we can see how the distribution changes. But even for, let's say, the Asian demographic, Asia is a massive continent with many countries that look and culturally are very different. And in order to do this job right, we have to even disaggregate that demographic in order to get a more precise diagnostic for who's more represented and who isn't. And so moving into this next phase, I want to quickly talk about why this stuff matters or why we should care about this, which I'm assuming you might assume that I'm preaching to the choir, but I want to give it some time and some space to do justice. Why does this stuff matter? This picture here, we can unanimously agree is egregious. And at some point between now and when this picture was taken, the status quo changed from this being a legitimate hiring practice for us finding it to be egregious, meaning that there is some place in this time continuum where we as humans tapped into our humanity and put that above the needs or the social status quo at the time, and said that we're going to prioritize humanity above the whims of the business. Because if we were susceptible to just the whims of the business, we would still have kids and children working in tumultuous conditions. We would still be working more than 40 hours a week. We would likely still be working more than 5 days a week in hazardous conditions, working worse, having worse wages than we do now. And this goes to show that there is a trend that worker protection has been expanding over time. And I did a little historical looking. There are some pretty big watershed moments in the expansion of worker protection I just want to talk about and highlight a few of them here. So the Department of Labor, that oversees everything in the United States with respect to worker protection, was established in 1913, and the Fair Labor Act, I believe it was called, in the 1930s, I think FDR passed it, established a lot of the norms that we just consider to be common sense in the, at one point, luxuries are just the status quo today. So a minimum wage, 40-hour work week, banning child labor, et cetera. And in the 60s, there was the Civil Rights Act, which banned, among other things, discrimination in the workforce and started diversity tracking. And there was an expansion of the Civil Rights Act in the 1990s and early 1990s that, among other things, of course, tightened sexual harassment rules and allowed for more recourse against sexual harassment in the workplace. And one thing that this doesn't show that I found in the research is that before each of these milestones, companies had already, in essence, a subset, started implementing some of these changes in the first place. So FDR implemented a 40-hour work week, or a few years, if not, I believe, a decade before 1938. And there were companies hiring Black employees before the 60s when it was federally mandated. So there is precedent for companies taking it upon themselves and doing what they know to be right. And it begs the question, which practices will look taboo 20, 50, and 80 years from now as we sit at this moment, roughly 30 years or roughly 30 years after one of the last watershed moments and worker expansion and equity in the workplace, if it wasn't called that, but that's in essence what it is. And this underscores one of the central points that I want to take away, that ends do not justify the means. and the Friedman doctrine era of maximizing shareholder profit at the expense of all else does not work. And we have to figure out a new paradigm that both prioritizes the needs of the business, which are legitimate, but has an ethical and humane center, that has an equitable center, and not prioritizing one at the expense of the other. And a little bit of optimism coming out of this is that it's not a mutually exclusive game. DEI is a shown business differentiator, and McKinsey and Company, since they began tracking this data in 2014, has seen correlations between financial outperformance and diversity. On the left here is the correlation of racial diversity, financial outperformance. So in essence, the yellow graph is companies that are not very diverse on the black companies that are doing racial diversity right, and they consistently earn more. And the same trend holds true with gender diversity. And there's still some room to grow in the industry itself. So since McKinsey started tracking it, there have been roughly a quarter have made significant gains in the executive ranks in terms of diversity and representation of the workforce. But roughly, a little over a quarter deviate significantly from parity. So they have a lot of work to be done and have made little changes and instrumented little change to even begin bending that curve towards equity. So the remainder part of the talk is the actionable part of how to actually begin bending that curve towards equity. So I'll be talking about first the 3 pillars, which represent our framework for systemic equity, which I want to reiterate, and I can't reiterate this point enough. As an individual and as an organization, we have no presumption to know the different nuances of your different sectors, your different geos, and your different job roles. But these pillars represent the anchors for, if you can think about the recommendations and your nuances through these 3 lenses or through this lens, you'll be grounded to something stable with respect to equity. So the first pillar here is equitable hiring, promotion, and compensation. You can think of this part as all of the worker and people side of the business. Secondly, equitable operations, programs, and portfolio. This is all of the mission-driven work, your products and services, your partners that you partner with in order to achieve your goals, and even the back of the house operations in terms of which vendors you partner with, et cetera. And lastly, equitable advocacy and lobbying. So to the extent that your business appears in the policy arena and in the legislative arena, it is to achieve equitable ends. And underneath those 3 pillars, we have 18 recommendations that, for time's sake, I will not talk about all of them, but I recommend that you read the policy or the proposal that we just released earlier this week that goes into detail for each one of these. And for the sake of time, I will talk about 4, which represent the most impactful and feasible starting place for achieving equity in the tech industry. So beginning to tease this out a little bit, this strategy for a more representative workforce is 4-fold, if you will, at least in terms of first steps. First, fixing your intake process. And this means partnering with whomever you need to partner with and sourcing from wherever you need to source, be it historically Black colleges and universities, predominantly Black social or professional networks like SHIP and NSBE or National Society for Black Engineers, and ultimately partnering with who you need to partner with to get your organization to parity. And then furthermore, once you get the constituent people, facilitating upward mobility for Black and brown employees so that they are homogeneously distributed up and down your company and your hierarchy. And that's when we begin to see the fruits of our diverse seedlings begin to sprout, as if they are distributed homogeneously through the organization. And lastly, exposing and closing these racial pay gaps, which when you look at all 3 of them, form the basis of these strategic initiatives. And just a quick moment on the end, or on exposing and closing racial pay gaps. People should just get paid the same wages for the same jobs, which is pretty intuitive. But even more broadly, that begins to close the racial pay gap and the racial subsequent, even more broad racial wealth gap, which we've seen. And the undercurrent, the foundational layer, is the measurement piece. So tracking and disaggregating and publishing your workforce's demographic progress towards parity. It is understood that you can't improve what you can't measure. So that piece is instrumental for all of the other pieces to happen. And when taken in conjunction, this forms the basis of a more representative workforce and achieving parity within your organizations, which is the upstream effect for a lot of other subsequent equitable changes in your organization. And I just want to take a moment to unpack this a bit further and substantiate why this is the most sensible starting place. A more representative workforce will improve the quantity and quality, or the quantitative and qualitative experience for the brown and Black employee. Speaking very personally as a Black employee, my engagement and sense of belonging when I see other people looking like me in a company, and moreover in leadership in a company, leads me to do better work and makes it less likely to feel checked out, such that I am less likely to leave, thereby improving retention for brown and Black employees, which at a more conceptual and at a higher downstream level improves the wealth and opportunity gap for a systemically disenfranchised group. And, you know, to tease out some of the benefits for corporations, and I mean, you know, altruism isn't a business model, as one of my mentors told me. Companies seek to improve their innovation and differentiated ideas by having diverse perspectives that come into companies. And, you know, if you have a homogenous workforce, how are you supposed to have any novel ideas? It's pretty intuitive. And if you have a representative workforce, you improve your speed to market, and that you are making fewer and lower risk assumptions about what your users and what your populations you are serving might need, so you can achieve the speed to market even better, which also includes or improves your business resilience. And being able to see different perspectives and see some of the shifting of the wind in the air that you might not get if you had a homogeneous workforce. So all of this is very conceptual and still kind of strategic. And this is some of the thinking behind the thinking, but I promised you very tactical, actionable, person-to-person feedback that all of us can be doing. So I want to, in this last part of my talk, leave you with some quick start items for what you can begin doing today. Each one of us on this call can begin doing these things. And another quick plug for our proposal, we outline different quick start items based on different archetypes. So whether you are a decision maker, think about if you're an executive, a founder, high-ranking VPs, the like, there are there are quick start items for you to do. In the managerial level and middle management level, you know, from directors down to team leads, and then employee level. And for the sake of the greatest common denominator, I'm going to focus on this right-hand column here. And specifically, I want to focus on three different quick start items for the everyday employee, for any one of us. So first, what we can do is find the racial and gender gaps on our own teams and advocate that our management hire or promote candidates to fill them. And why this matters is getting teams, the team level, to be representative is the first step to getting the big macro organization to be representative. And it's often within our sphere of influence that we have more control over our teams than some far off corner of the company. We can control the staffing here. And moreover, how to get started. We can, if we have the luxury of having the data, that's awesome, but more often than not, we can just look around and manually tally or in our heads or on paper the demographics of our team and compare it to local baselines, whatever that looks like for you, and recommend that the next slot be filled with an underrepresented group. And in the absence of hiring, or, not everyone is in a hiring mode right now. Obviously, companies are tightening their wallets, or some are. We can help to ensure that voices of Black and Brown employees get heard. So why this matters is reaping the benefits of the diverse team requires that everyone can be heard, and that there is a seat at the table for every underrepresented group, or every group across the demographics. And how to get started with this is seeking out the feedback of voices absent on your teams. And that could look like, if you work with another person who shares a different demographic than you, asking them to collaborate, asking to get feedback on your product or your deliverable or your strategy. And in the event that that ends up being a winning idea, being very liberal with the credit when appropriate, and doing what you can to amplify that person and get them more visibility that they might not be able to get themselves. And lastly, identifying your blind spots and reflect on your own biases and doing the work to become anti-racist. So this is important because you can only fix what you can see and precisely diagnose. And doing this internal work of how we might, or how we are complicit and might be complicit, and all of us in some respect have internalized problematic behaviors and can do the work to becoming anti-racist. And it's important to doing that reflection and that internal work, and it's free. And how to get started is to take the implicit association test. You can Google the IAT, I think it's Harvard's, or Project Implicit, and look up the anti-racism activation kit, and start walking along. And there are copious materials and resources online. And even more abstractly, or maybe more brought outside the workplace, taking an inventory of the perspectives that are present and absent in your own life. So in your media consumption, in your friend groups, in the music you listen to, and the articles you read, and begin seeing the world through perspectives that you might not have been historically seeing or seeking out. And even more tactically than that, block off an hour of your calendar tomorrow, sit down and read the proposal and commit to driving 3 changes. I know I mentioned there are 18, but only commit to making 3 to start, and find 3 other friends and make it happen, and hold each other accountable, and figure out collectively who can leverage whose strengths to amplify this mission and to enable this mission. And lastly, we've, over the past 18 months, experienced swift and widespread systemic change. And if we can do it once, I know for sure we can do it again. And moreover, we understand that it only takes 3. Activating 3 people, changing 3 things, and we can see widespread systemic change in our lifetime and over a short enough time frame. But before we start changing 3 people, the change starts with us. So please read, sign, and share our proposal. The link is here. I'll share the link in the chat. Maybe the link will get shared after the chat. And I just thank y'all for y'all's time and attention. And this is where to find us in our work. I appreciate y'all. Thanks. And I'll answer questions. I think that's all I got. Oops. Questions. I'm going to open up the chat, and if there are questions there, I'll do my best to answer. It doesn't include Indigenous people, which is, there's this work in and of itself, but it's definitely inclusive of Indigenous people. I saw that in the chat.
Yeah,
Any questions?
Just double checking. I know that we are recording this, and the recording should be available within 1 to 2 weeks later on the ADW Slack channel on YouTube. But is there anywhere that we can see the deck, or that any participants can see it afterwards?
I didn't anticipate sharing the deck. I'll reflect on it a bit more, but the talk will be public, and I'll be circulating it like crazy.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, All right, Nicole, that's a good question. So I do, and I failed to mention that I do work for IBM in my 9 to 5. Tech Can Do Better is a 5 to 9 project. But and for the duration of this project, and I guess it's worth saying, I was extremely active in a lot of the racial equity initiatives within IBM. So at some point, I was a lot savvier than I am now. But for the sake of scaling Tech Can Do Better, I focus my attention here. But some of the most impressive work that I've seen, again, I only have limited visibility, and not to be rah-rah about IBM, but it came out of the IBM design program, and they have racial equity in design, and you can look it up, and it's very comprehensive. And as far as the company is concerned, very, very bold racial equity plans and stances, and just very raw. For instance, the GM or the former GM of IBM Design funded a whole work stream towards racial equity in design, which I don't know how many companies can say that, put forth a director over that, had headcount for it, and did just amazing work. And I think you can find that at, Nicole, thanks for sharing. That was some powerful work, and I think it was some pretty good stuff. And I think we're featured on that site. So I'm not just saying that because it's a mutual plug, but it's good work. Any other questions? I'm here all day, or more appropriately until they kick me off at 6. Oh yeah. Well, welcome aboard, Sarah. I'm sure you can find me on Slack. Yeah. What was it like to iterate an initial thesis with the team? Oh man, that's a great question, Edmund. Someone who's been around since the OG. So it was, this is now just me speaking very personally. I felt it was very audacious, and our initial aim with the proposal was to have an industry-wide point of view around what does equity look like from the perspective of Black and Brown employees across the industry. And I had no clue what that looked like, or if honestly I was the best person to do that. But I took it out there, and I don't think that, and I collaborated a lot and got a lot of perspectives, and by the end of that, we got a lot of collaboration, a lot of eyes on it. I put it out there kind of as like a feeler for what resonated the most with people and what people felt like it was missing. And through the community and through, just talking to people one-on-one, I realized elements that were just not immediately intuitive, or, even personally not bold enough, that I didn't include. So this round, to iterate on it, what I was prioritizing was making it as comprehensive and as true to the entire ecosystem as I've seen it, maybe at risk of being a little too comprehensive and at the risk of, let's say, digestibility and brevity, as we saw in the last one, because I wanted it to be our constitution as a business. So I wanted to have everything be here and be crystal clear about not just the what and how to get started, but some of the why and context, which the last version omitted. I mean, if you look at version 1 to version 2, there's a lot more context setting and why this is a problem. Because it's one thing to say these are the solutions, but almost invariably someone asks why, and I just wanted to have that why there. So it was feedback that I'd been hearing for a while, and sometimes themes begin to emerge in the feedback, but also editorially, I wanted to have something that lived a little bit longer and didn't feel like it was going to get swept up in the fads of this is the DEI trend of today. And I just wanted to make it more comprehensive. That's probably the one word answer to your question. Did that answer your question? You can give me a thumbs up. You can give me a, hey, that you're tweaking. Ask a follow-up question. Any other questions? Okay, can you share some of the learnings? Advocate the vision to those who are not in the core community. Okay, it depends on who I've talked to. So as a part of this, let's say I had a very vivid example of me talking to one of my business strategy friends, and he's one of like the blue-blooded consulting types, like strategy consulting. And he's like, this is all well and good, but like, what differentiated value are you offering? And it's, you know, in terms of the decision maker persona, they're thinking about things in this way. And unless you can articulate very clearly, and I guess this is kind of showing where my head is, I think it's been relatively straightforward to talk to the everyday employee. I think that I resemble the most of that persona. So speaking to that feels like the in group, and the out group, the not core community, feels like this abstract persona that I'm trying to get into the head of. So it's been, I've been having to like tap into my, this is the status quo and conventional way of thinking, and kind of like the, you know, this is the very, what doesn't feel innate is like, this is the business case behind diversity, which feels kind of inhumane, but it is what it is. So I'm trying to be very practical about this whole thing. But I think that, can you share some of the learnings? Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I answer your question. It just feels like the persona that I'm having the hardest time, and thereby learning the most, is that decision maker, because I feel pretty far away from where their head is. So I've been having to like channel a persona in my head that I don't innately relate to. Maybe that answers your question. Hopefully it does. Any other questions? I see a lot of smiling avatars. I'm an open book. Yeah, how's it going?
Thank you so much for doing your talk. I'm a student and I'm interested in going into the tech field. I know that's not part of your proposal, but do you have in mind, kind of like us on the spot, like questions I should ask, or like things I should look for as I'm applying to jobs or like seeking out where I'd like to work? Because I would like to be part of a company that's, you know, trying to implement these things, is already, you know, has some kind of program initiated. I can talk to other like Black and brown employees, and they can like advocate for those things as well.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that like any like interviewing tips in terms of like asking kind of questions like that, or just like scoping out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a great question. I feel like it depends on what you're looking for, and it truly does. Like, and I mean, that's so cookie cutter, and I'll just say even further. And I would have questions to ask. So when you say what questions you should be asking, I mean, I would just flip it back of like, what are you looking for out of a company? And if you theoretically, I'm assuming by you being here, it's you want some sort of equitable practices. But I think that maybe one of the best questions you can ask is to talk, or even just independently reach out to someone who works there and who's not in the interviewing cycle, because obviously they're salesmen, which is valid, and it's one perspective, but it's important to get the candid perspective. And at that point, it's just asking the candid questions. So I think you know them deep down in your center, what you're looking for, and just being open, because you're going to be working, you're going to be spending like a third of your waking hours at this place. You might as well be honest and like feel like you're getting all of the data to make that decision. Does that answer? I hope that does.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, you can ask I mean, it's pretty intimate, so you can ask a follow-up, and we have nothing but time. So.
Oh no. I know something I was wondering about as you were talking was like, the fact that representation really does matter. But something else I'm thinking about is like, in terms of like changing values and culture within a company so that it's not just about the representation, that there's also like a foundation there of like just the way that the company and employees believe that they should be working amongst each other, and like what kind of work they put out. So like,
Yeah.
are there any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I definitely have thoughts around that. And this is something that I've wrestled with because it feels like the essence of that question is the chicken egg, getting people in the door, keeping people in the door, building a culture that keeps people there, et cetera, et cetera. And my current thinking, and I can be proven wrong, is that it doesn't feel necessarily fair to expect people who don't have, as a concrete example, I am a guy. I have no presumption for what the woman female experience is. So it would be weird for me to start designing solutions for women, and that's just not me. What I can do is bring women in and be open-minded and let that demographic shape the company in ways that accommodate them. And in the same way, I think that while it's presented as a chicken egg situation, if you bring people will create culture. Like that's what we do. If you left all of us on this call here long enough, we would create our own culture. Like culture almost lags behind bringing the people around, right? So just get the people in the door. I mean, that affects people's lives. People need jobs, people need to work. And I mean, this is still really hand wavy, but just allow those people the tools and give those people the tools to shape the culture that accommodates to them. Does that, I feel
Yes.
that's my POV. And I think that answers the question, but
Yes,
if anyone
thank
pushes
you.
back. All right, have you noticed any trend in breaking through some privileged people and abilities? Oh yeah, so I can give you a micro example, Jen. So shortly after George Floyd was murdered, my team at IBM, and it wasn't even me who started this, it was one of my coworkers, started a weekly racial justice call where we would discuss systemic racial justice. And I mean, it was like in education and healthcare, racial wealth gap, all of this stuff. And we had a lot of candid conversations in the workplace with people on my team. And I vividly remember, I think I was talking with one of my coworkers, he's pretty senior, and he was like, I think that changes need to be made, but I just don't think it should be made like right now in the midst of what everything is happening. There's like this big old shuffle. And I just asked him like, well, if it's not now, like when's the right time for change? If not literally right now. And he was like taken aback by it. We got off the call, and then some weeks later he was like, I'm still thinking about that question. Like this thing, I truly don't have a good answer for you. And I just wanted to let you know that you moved me. So, I know that was framed as a yes or no question, but I found as one of the best tools that I've had success with is just asking questions. Like, I think about that movie Inception a lot. If you can allow people to come to the answers themselves and like plant the seed in their own head and allow them to find it, you have more luck in convincing someone. I don't know. There are very few times, let's say, when someone's outright told me something that I don't agree with, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. I changed my mind. I have to come there on my own. So, and I think that's the elaboration on the answer or the question you asked. Yeah, these are great questions.
I kind of have a follow-up question onto that. I think like everything that you're saying today is just like really great, and just like really great points about diversity and everything. I guess just my kind of follow-up question was is how do you kind of navigate like those difficult conversations in the workplace, when it comes to like maybe like racial conversations? Like how do you navigate those conversations in the workplace?
Yeah, so I won't answer your question directly, but I'll get to it. I think that I very quickly found that I have a community of people that I feel safe talking around. So for instance, I have a coworker who initiated those racial justice calls. She's on the team. She's one of my biggest confidants. We are pot stirring soulmates. So I feel like I can bring my full self, and there are pockets of other people, but I might not be the best person to ask that question to, because I am just innately more of a pot stirrer. And the way I see it is that if I get reprimanded, or if there's some recourse for advocating for something that I know to be right, and I'm pretty sure we all know to be right, the worst things could happen to me. Like, I don't care. I'm not in the right place if I get punished for that stuff. So the combination of that just being who I am, like, who cares if, like, let's entertain some idea. And I trust myself to be diplomatic while also speaking what I believe to be true. But if I get fired or something like that, like, in the scheme of things, who cares? Like, civil rights leaders weren't cared about getting fired. Like, come on. And it helps that I have a community. So I think it's those two things. But it is kind of intoxicating. Like, once you start speaking very candidly, you kind of want to keep doing it. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. But also, maybe I'm being a little too glib. I assume the benefit of the doubt quite a bit too. And, you know, it's not helpful to assume that people are coming at you with bad intentions. Often people are doing the best they can. So it's to say that you are expressing this, what to me deep down might be like pretty problematic, but you're expressing it to me in confidence. And it's like, all right, let's talk about this. Like, and I'll assume this is something you believe, and we'll go from there. I'm going to do my best to understand where you're coming from. I always try to understand. I forgot who said it. It might have been Obama who said it. Like, the cornerstone of, like, winning an argument is being able to articulate someone's point of view better than they can. So if you can do that first and then inject your own point of view after the fact, I found just, like, listening, asking questions to be successful, and just being very, very forthcoming and candid about, like, where my stances are, where my lines are. Edmund, I saw you go off video. I don't know if you want to, well, actually, I'll get to you in a second. You asked a question. Emma, you said something in chat. Do you have any research activities regularly focused? That is innately no. In spirit, kind of design thinking as a philosophy, and, like, not to rah design thinking, but at its core, it feels like a very egalitarian tool. So it's, when something is up and you're sticky noting on the wall and you put it on the wall, there's not a hierarchy attached to it. There's not a race. There's not an age. An idea is, in its purest form, an idea. And you put that up on the wall. And if you're practicing the spirit of design thinking, like Nicole said, I'm an IBMer, so enterprise design thinking. You're quietly you're quietly writing. Ideas are ideas. You cluster them, and it's the best idea wins, or the remixing of ideas wins. Very egalitarian. And there are specific tools that, you know, begin to tease out ways of working and, you know, trying to level the playing field a little bit more, which, do you have any research activities? Yeah, I mean, that feels like a very big question. I think the best answer I can give at that fidelity is, you know, design thinking is a great tool. And for that, I'm not getting paid to say this, but enterprise design thinking is great. Other companies have great design thinking practices. I'm sure Stanford D schools have some great stuff, but it'd be sacrilege if I didn't say IBM. So
to kind of quickly dovetail off of that, like, I guess I know you've come out with the proposal that you guys recently released. Is there any desire for you to kind of create some of that educational material so that it can be more actionable in a sense, besides kind of getting the word out and then actually creating an educational system in a way that can then be shared by other people in the community as well.
Yeah, I mean, basically that tees up the what's next for us. And, you know, we're, as a leadership team, we're still figuring that out. You know, personally riffing a little bit, that is an option. You know, I see us at a series of junctures, and it is just matching our supply, you know, things that we can conceivably deliver and, you know, happily and sanely deliver with the demand for people who might be funding us. I mean, we want to continue this work in perpetuity, and maybe not in perpetuity, but until it's no longer needed. And that is one avenue. If we find that there's demand for it, I'm open to creating that literature. It could be that the demand is for executive coaching, or it could be that the demand is for more, you know, let's say blue-blooded consulting and analysis like McKinsey, but with a tech and equity focus. I mean, it's hard to say. The next step is talking with decision makers, talking with prospective users, and just seeing what resonates the strongest. So, and using this as like, this is who we are, this is what we're about, and getting our foot in the door that way. I'm loving these questions. We have 7 minutes. The time is flying. Are there any other questions? Hopefully I didn't miss any in chat. If I missed one in chat, okay, Lauren, here we go. Lauren, I just read your question. Also a great question. If so, I have not seen it. Oh, no, it wasn't confusing at all. It wasn't until late that, and it's worth noting, one of my mentors is this decision maker persona, and he's been helping me craft some of the narrative and some of the direction. So I haven't sat down with them and, you know, actually talked to them. I guarantee our work is made it in front of people, but the feedback hasn't made it back to us. But this next chapter in our journey as an organization is just going to be to tease out to what extent they care about equity, and to what extent we can make them care about equity in conjunction with all of their business needs, what problems they face, what headwinds they're facing, and how we can alleviate those. But it's too soon to say definitively yes or no. My intuition says I'll have some trouble. Otherwise, I mean, the alternative is, if they didn't need convincing, we would have already seen change by now. So, you know, I kind of foresee headwinds, but I can't say definitively yet. That's a great question, though. It wasn't confusing. Of course. We probably have time for one or two more before I get the cane off stage. Any other people? Anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Anyone who has spoken yet? Anyone's feeling chatty?
Lawrence, did you want to paste the link to the proposal or anything?
That would be lovely. Let's do that. Okay. This should work. 1 second. Of course, it won't work when I go to do it. Or if I see a familiar face in the crowd, if someone beats me to it, that is let me try to find it. I'm not the best multitasking. I hear guys suck at this stuff. So okay, thank you. Amazing. Thank y'all. All right, maybe if that is it, let me drop. Yeah, that one's not working. Okay, so I appreciate your attention. I realized, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut someone off.
I'm sorry. I do have a quick question, I hope.
Yep.
Why, I noticed that you say you specify tech, and you have a lot of great material that you discuss, and I really appreciate you taking your time for that. But why not maybe in the near future branch off into just in the business world alone? And I say that because I was in the legal field for many years, and I'm a career changer going into tech. And time and time and time again, I ran into some of the same challenges that you mentioned, and felt like many times I was the one who advocated or attempted to advocate as much as I could, but with a very limited resources. So I just wanted to get your take on something like that.
No, that's a great question. And my understanding, and I think that, and my guess and hunch is exactly what you said, is our material would be helpful for people across industries in different sectors and even in different geos. We as an organization, me as an individual, I only know the tech industry and I can speak most fluently to the tech industry. So to have the greatest probability of success is not, boiling the ocean. I'm sure that our practices apply to other industries, but I don't want to boil the ocean. I don't want to add nuance and add complexity if I'm just getting started. So if we find that something catches on in the tech industry and we can apply to business, that's awesome. In the meantime, this material exists for folks like you in other industries to use it and plant the seeds of business can do better, or healthcare or legal can do better, or something like that. So by all means, the template is there for you to use.
For sure, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all. I think that's it. I think I'm getting the cane.
You're not getting the cane. Thank you, everyone. I wouldn't pull a cane out. No way. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and thank everyone. Give Lawrence a good old round of applause for hosting us. Amazing stuff. All right, enjoy the rest of your ADW. Don't forget about the survey that's going to be linked to you in the Zoom chat, and have a good one. Bye, everyone.
Bye, y'all. Thanks.